Chapter 17. Tangled Webs. A damp chill clung to the corridors of the abandoned apartment building, as though the crumbling walls exhaled their own quiet despair. Dim morning light filtered through cracks in boarded windows, just enough to cast elongated shadows of Selene and Ethan as they moved with hurried steps. In the back of her mind, Selene still felt the pulse of the dream realm, frayed and bleeding into reality. Each flicker in her peripheral vision, an out-of-place shape or color, reminded her how the meltdown's fallout had torn open something fundamental. Ahead, Draven stood with crossed arms, his posture guarded. 3 other watchers lingered behind him, scanning the halls for any sign of the traitor's presence. Tension roiled beneath every interaction. No one trusted even the walls to keep their secrets. Selene paused, nerves swirling. "So, Ethan and I will try to locate the boundary's weakest point," she repeated, a tremor in her voice. "We'll attempt a controlled drift into the dream realm, see if I can use Oneiric Fusion to stabilize things. At least enough to stop illusions from spiraling out of control." Ethan nodded, slipping the strap of a small satchel across his chest. Inside were dream stabilizers, an improvised device for anchoring them in a shared trance. "If we do nothing," he added quietly, "these stray illusions could spawn mass panic, and we have no guarantee the regime won't exploit that to crush us once and for all." Draven's gaze flicked between them, worry etched into the lines of his face. "Understood. But watch yourselves. The meltdown triggered anomalies we've never dealt with. If the boundary is truly torn, you might walk into a dreamscape that fights back, or that tries to latch onto you permanently." Ava, leaning on her makeshift crutch nearby, offered a subdued nod. "Remember, if it gets overwhelming, break the connection. Don't get lost in that realm." Her empathic voice carried a tremor, still recovering from the rail yard ambush. "We'll monitor from here, try to keep a tether." Selene mustered what resolve she could. Over the past hours, flickers of illusions had haunted her vision, half-formed nightmares materializing, then dissolving. If she didn't act soon, the Watcher's fragile unity might fracture completely. With every accidental manifestation, paranoia grew that the traitor was stirring nightmares on purpose, or that the meltdown had doomed them all. They chose a vacant apartment on the top floor, once a child's bedroom judging by the faded murals of stars on the walls. The Watchers nailed a plank across the door to deter interruptions. Dust-laden air glimmered in the pale light from a single high window. It felt eerily peaceful, as though the room existed in a separate slice of time. Ethan knelt on the warped floorboards, setting out 2 dream stabilizers with practiced care. Selene crouched beside him, pressing her palm to the floor to steady a tremor that rolled through her. "Am I ready for this?" she wondered. If illusions had nearly destroyed them, what did it mean to intentionally walk into the dream realm's raw wound? "You're not alone," Ethan said, as if sensing her doubt. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. She returned a faint smile, grateful for his steadiness despite her swirling fears. Closing her eyes, she slowed her breathing. She pictured the boundary in her mind, a shimmering, ragged veil between dreams and waking. They'd slip into that space, attempt to spot the worst tears, and see if she could weave a stable seam with her fusion power. She exhaled, letting the faint hum of the stabilizers sync with her heartbeat. The shift was abrupt. One moment, Selene clung to the musty floor. The next, she felt the pull of a hush deeper than silence. The dream realm stretched around them, dimly lit by an impossible twilight. The walls of the apartment flickered, half translucent, as though rendered in watercolor. Ethan stood beside her, likewise half real, his silhouette pulsing gently in her peripheral vision. A swirl of partial illusions drifted through the corridors. Phantoms of watchers, fragments of flickering daydreams the meltdown had unleashed. Shapes formed and vanished at the corners of her eyes, each echoing a latent fear or memory. The entire building felt layered with ephemeral scenery, ghostly vines along the walls, echoes of children's laughter, sometimes even the rumble of distant thunder that made the floor tremble underfoot. "Is this all from the meltdown?" Ethan asked softly, stepping around a shifting pattern that looked like shattered glass on the floor. Selene nodded, pressing a hand to her chest. She felt the dream energy swirling inside her, roiling. The meltdown opened a wound, letting random illusions seep through. If I can find the biggest tear... She let her senses drift, scanning for the place where illusions felt most distorted. At once, a murmur of emotion tugged her, like an invisible current. She followed it down the hall, her footprints leaving slight ripples in the dream-laced floor. Ethan shadowed her, careful not to let illusions snag his concentration. Their journey led to a deeper corridor, each step accompanied by flickering shapes. Sometimes, Selene glimpsed wraith-like watchers sobbing with no sound. Sometimes monstrous outlines loomed. The boundary felt raw here, and it tugged on her Oneiric Fusion like a magnet. Her pulse quickened. She paused at a half-collapsed doorway. Beyond it lay what looked like the same child's bedroom in the real world, but overlaid with swirling color that defied geometry. The walls breathed as if alive, the star murals dancing. A dull ache struck behind her eyes, as though the dream realm pressed against her skull. "This must be the tear," she whispered, reaching out. The air thrummed with power. Ethan crouched by her, brow furrowed. "Be careful." He placed a supportive hand on her back, sharing in her tension. "If it's too much..." Selene closed her eyes and concentrated, letting the swirl of Oneiric Fusion awaken. She felt illusions stirring at her command, weaving in slow ribbons of light. The tear flickered, its edges trembling. She tried to coax them together, forging a seam from her own fear and hope. For a moment it worked. The swirling color stabilized, binding like glowing threads. Relief blossomed in her chest. "I can do this." But abruptly, a spasm of dark emotion tore through her mind. She felt an echo of betrayal, a sense of dread, like the Watcher's collective fear poured into the dream realm. The tear shuddered, resisting her illusions with a violent lurch. Darkness bled into her vision, and illusions coalesced into a twisted figure, faceless but heavy with malice. It lunged at her, howling with a silent roar. Selene gasped, illusions unraveling. The tear flared open, a wave of raw dream energy crashing outward. Ethan yanked her aside, bracing them both against the wall as the entire corridor warped. Staccato illusions slammed around them, flickers of nightmares from watchers across the city. The meltdown had made this place too unstable for a mere patch. Panting, Selene forced her eyes open. "It's not working. The meltdown's damage runs deeper. We need something stronger, a unifying anchor." Tears pricked her eyes. She glimpsed the twisted figure reforming in the swirling gloom, as if drawn to her presence. Ethan's grip trembled. "Let's get out. We can't do this alone." Reluctance gnawed at Selene. She hated retreat, but illusions cracked around them, the tear roiling like a hurricane's eye. If they stayed, she risked being swallowed by a maelstrom of half-formed nightmares. With a heavy heart, she withdrew her concentration. Their link to the dream realm dissolved in a rush, catapulting them back into the battered apartment. Selene collapsed onto the floorboards, gasping. Her entire body shook, sweat beading on her brow. Ethan knelt beside her, pressing a hand to her shoulder. Outside the door, watchers pounded, calling if they were all right. Draven's urgent voice carried through the plywood barrier. Selene just shook her head, tears mixing with frustration. She'd glimpsed the torn boundary, and realized the watchers lacked the unity or power to mend it. Not alone, at least. Ethan helped her upright, voice tight. "We'll report to Draven. Maybe they found another lead." He paused, searching her gaze. "Don't blame yourself, we tried." Selene gave a shaky nod, though despair churned in her gut. Tangled webs of illusions, meltdown aftermath, and betrayal now enmeshed the watchers in a crisis that seemed unstoppable. If the tear refused to be sealed, nightmares would bleed into reality unabated, fueling the regime's clampdown. She drew a ragged breath, stepping into the corridor, flanked by watchers who offered fleeting solace. The air in the building felt heavier than before, an invisible weight pressing on every soul. Selene swallowed, bracing herself. She had seen firsthand how savage the meltdown's aftermath could be, and how easily illusions could spiral beyond their control. The Watchers needed a plan that transcended illusions and anchored them in something real. Otherwise, these tangled webs might pull them all into darkness, leaving no dream unbroken.